Howdy my totally as always Tubular gamers, and we're back with, you guessed it, another ranking video, and today we're going to be talking Persona, but not just any Persona, we're talking Persona 5. Now Persona 5, I don't know how much of an introduction the game needs, it's one of the greatest RPGs of all time, one of the most iconic RPGs, especially of the last 10 or so years, part of the Shin Megami Tensei series, and it's easily the most popular of not only all of Persona, but SMT as a whole. And with it getting so much popularity, naturally there's been other games about Persona 5. There was that original game back in 2016, but since then there's actually been various other spin-offs and follow-ups, and so I thought today we would take a look at all of the Persona 5 games. We're looking at all the games that are based around Persona 5, including Persona 5 itself, Persona 5 Royal, Persona 5 Strikers, Persona Q2, Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight, and now the recently released Persona 5 Tactica. So suffice to say, I think there's enough Persona 5 games to do a ranking video. I mean, hey, we're not ranking all the Last of Us games, all 2 of them. But what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be looking at these 6 games, giving each one of them a little review, stacking them up against each other, worst to best, which ones are worth playing, which ones are really worth playing, and just sharing my general thoughts. If you want me to review and rank the entire Persona series, that's coming in the future. It absolutely is coming in the future, but you know what, you can let me know down below if that's what you want to see. Speaking of letting me know down below, this is just my list, my opinion. There might be some really hot takes, some really cold takes. Let me know how you're feeling. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. We got the super thanks and the Patreon going on as well. Any support really is greatly appreciated. Also subscribe. We're doing lots of ranking videos and reviews on upcoming games, so there's that also. Let's just get right into it. Of these games, which do I think is the weakest? And here we have Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight, which came out in 2018. Now, it really shouldn't come as a surprise that out of all of the Persona 5 games, the weakest is the dancing game, the rhythm game. This game was also paired with Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight and is a follow-up to the Persona 4 rhythm game, Persona 4 Dancing All Night, and is incredibly similar. The only difference really is that it's Persona 5 characters, it's different music, and I guess it takes place after the Persona 4 dancing game, and it sees the Phantom Thieves going into a dance-off, and yeah, the story, it's pretty silly and goofy and not meant to be taken all that seriously, and it's best to just not think about it. When it comes to the gameplay, it is, again, very similar to the Persona 4 dancing game, which is a pretty standard rhythm game, where you have a 6-button system and you have to hit notes in sync with the music. It's pretty standard stuff, and I think it's fine. The rhythm gameplay, I don't really have any complaints with it. It feels fine enough, and it gets the job done. I wouldn't say it's particularly all that imaginative, and it's certainly not pushing the rhythm game genre forward in any meaningful way, but hey, it's a rhythm game with the Persona 5 characters, so I guess that's cool. Presentation-wise, yeah, it is pretty similar to the last one. It doesn't really look much better, but it's, again, fine for what it is. What really matters with this game is the music, and the music actually does slap. The music is very good. The music is very good in all the Persona rhythm games. Actually, let me take that back. The music's not just good in the Persona rhythm games. You'd be hard-pressed to find a single Persona game where the music does not slap. The music is great in all of these games, and it's very good in this game also. The music's great, the presentation is fine, the gameplay is adequate enough. The game doesn't do anything amazing, but I wouldn't say it's a bad game either. I think it's alright for what it is, but I can see that this game is a pretty limited appeal. I really can't recommend it to anybody except fans of Persona 5 that are open to rhythm games. If you like rhythm games but not Persona, I don't really know if I can recommend this game, and vice versa. But if you came here to see Joker and the Phantom Thieves get jiggy with it, I think you're going to be pretty satisfied with this one. And here we have Persona Q2 New Cinema Labyrinth, releasing for the 3DS in 2019. So this game, as the number implies, is a follow-up to the original Persona Q and sees the Persona 5 characters finding themselves in some kind of film that is connected to this theater that is locked from the inside, and so the Phantom Thieves continue on through these films and make some allies in the form of Persona 3 and 4 characters, and they're all really just trying to get out of there. The story is fine enough. It takes a few interesting turns, but I'm not going to say it was crazy or amazing or unexpected. It really didn't subvert my expectations, and anybody who's played a Persona game can pretty much see what's going to happen a mile away. Look, is this the best crossover I've ever seen in a JRPG? No, but I still enjoyed it for what it was, and I did enjoy all the fan service, especially if you're a fan of the Persona 3 and 4 characters. There is some good fan service here, and it still is cool to see all these characters interacting with each other, and the novelty is absolutely there. The story, it was alright for what it was, and the dialogue was pretty decent here as well. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, this is very, very similar to the first Persona Q's gameplay, where it's a mix of Persona and Etrian Odyssey, where there are plenty of SMT elements, whether it's the one more, the criticals, the elements, etc, etc. If you've played an SMT game, you're going to recognize all of that immediately, but there is some Etrian Odyssey gameplay here, particularly with the dungeons and the design of the dungeons. You know, you'll choose a couple party members to go into the dungeon, and then it's in first person where you're walking around exploring, mapping it out, and getting into fights, very similar to any of the Etrian Odyssey games. And what you have here is a more than solid enough gameplay loop. As you explore around these maze-like dungeons, you know, you'll find treasure, you'll have to find the stairs to progress to the next area, and then a bunch of enemies will always jump you, and then it's Persona fights. And I think the battle mechanics are just as solid as they've been for really any of the other Persona games. I think it's totally fine here. It doesn't feel like there's as much strategy as, say, the mainline Persona games, but I still enjoyed the combat, and exploring the mazes, I'm not gonna lie to you, it does get a little old. Some of these dungeons do feel pretty tedious by the end of it, and I was just like, kind of like, where's the exit? I've had enough of this. Like, Etrian Odyssey's dungeons I've never been huge on, and this game, yeah, I'm not huge on it either. The dungeons are okay, the dungeon crawling gameplay's fine, and the combat is fine, but I'm not gonna act like this game particularly wowed me gameplay wise. I was just like, yeah, it's a competent, decent RPG that I had some fun with. Maybe I'm being overly critical about it here, but it just didn't hook me like other Persona games have hooked me. The presentation for the 3DS is pretty nice. I like the art style, and of course the music is gonna slap in this game. It does slap in this game. Interestingly enough, this was like the last 3DS game like in North America. I think it was the last physical 3DS game. So did the 3DS go out with a bang? Well, I still think this is a good game. While it didn't rock my cock off and it didn't like wow me, I still enjoyed my time with it. And again, I think it is a decent RPG that I have no problem recommending to Persona fans. Everyone else though, I don't know. I can just tell you though, by looking at this game, the fact that it's a 3DS exclusive, it's a JRPG, and that it's good, yeah, this is going to be a really expensive game in the future, well over $100, and probably begging for a re-release. So get it now while it's cheaper if you love Persona. Otherwise, you could probably skip this one. And here we have Persona 5 Strikers releasing in the West in 2021. Now, Strikers I was very intrigued from the moment it was announced, just because it was being developed by Omega Force and would be a Dynasty Warriors Musou style game. Now, when it comes to the story, I'm going to try to be as spoiler-free as possible and just say it takes place a few months after Persona 5, and it sees the gang getting back together and exploring some mysteries, and yeah, that's really all I'm going to say. I think the story's good. I think it's a good continuation of what Persona 5 establishes, and it continues it in a meaningful way. I love these characters. I like how this game does introduce a couple new characters, new antagonists, etc., and I think they're decently well developed. They're fine. They're good additions here. The story, yeah, I think it's good. Is it as strong as, you know, regular Persona 5? No, but I think it is a good addition. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, what you're really doing in this game is it is a mix of Persona and Omega Force's Dynasty Warriors series. So it is an action hack and slash RPG where you'll be constantly mowing down tons and tons of shadows and enemies, but there are plenty of RPG elements sprinkled in, whether it's leveling up in your stats, creating personas. Your main character, Joker, does get to equip multiple personas so you can fuse them and do all of that fun stuff. There are some side quests, there are bonds, which replaces confidants. But yeah, generally the RPG elements are not lacking. When it comes to the action side, it is very much a hack and slash. It doesn't have, you know, a ton of depth to it, but I think it is a decent hack and slash, and I like the implementation of a bunch of Persona elements. I think the controls are more than solid enough, and the combat is actually nice. It even has some satisfying elements. All of the characters are relatively different from each other, and it feels incredibly fluid. It actually feels better than most of these Dynasty Warriors games. Like, I've played quite a bit of Dynasty Warriors and the spin-offs, whether it was the main series or Samurai Warriors or Warriors Orochi or One Piece Pirate Warriors or Hyrule Warriors, Fire Emblem Warriors, the Berserk spin-off, etc, etc, and I gotta say, the gameplay of this game is actually some of the best gameplay of the entire franchise, Musou series, whatever you want to call it. It's actually good. It's not too mindless. There's a little bit of depth here. The levels actually have a decent amount of level design. You'll be solving puzzles and interacting with the environment way more than you do in any other Dynasty Warriors game. The RPG elements are nice. They're not as in-depth as main Persona games, but I like that they're here. I like that the game does have a stealth system kind of implemented from Persona 5. In fact, the game has a decent amount of fan service and implementation from Persona 5. It doesn't feel like they just have a Dynasty Warriors game with the Persona license slapped on it. No, this very much does feel like a Persona game. It just happens to be an action RPG that has a number of similarities to Dynasty Warriors, and I think it's actually a ton of fun. It's got a good length to it, taking well over 30 to 40 hours. The game has a very nice presentation. The music, of course the music's gonna slap. Like, this game has a lot going for it, and if you're a fan of Persona, particularly Persona 5, this game is almost a must-play. Like, if you hate action RPGs or hack and slashes, then yeah, I guess you're not going to really like the game, but it does have more than you'd expect. There's actually in-depth dungeons, the characters feel quite different from each other, there is the RPG elements, it's more than just a mindless hack and slash where you press one or two buttons the entire time. I think the game has a good story, I like the characters it introduces, and it actually feels like it really does expand the world of Persona 5, which is really all you could hope for from one of these spin-offs. It doesn't just feel like a mindless cash grab by Sega and Atlus, it is a full-length action RPG that has a lot going for it, and I have, again, no problem recommending it to anyone who likes Persona. And here we have Persona 5 Tactica, the latest in the Persona 5 series, and the series has taken another interesting turn. This time they're taking a stab at turn-based tactics. Yes, this is a tactical RPG. When it comes to the story, this game does take place during Persona 5, I guess the later half of Persona 5, and it sees our heroes, the Phantom Thieves, getting transported to another world. All of a sudden, they really are teleported to this strange other world filled with war and oppression and this crazy ruler, and so it's up to the Phantom Thieves to really save the day and stop this lady from doing whatever the hell she's trying to do. The story gets much more complex than that. They introduce a few new characters, but I actually did quite like the story here. I think the game does have a very good payoff with its story. While at first it isn't super clear what's going on, in fact it's not clear for like most of the game what's going on, once the story really starts to unravel and start to make sense and come together, yeah, I think it's actually pretty good. And again, it does have a solid payoff. I like the new characters they introduce here. They do add more to the world of Persona 5, and our main cast is as great as always. Look, the story's not going to make you go, yeehaw, this is the best story ever. No, it's not going to blow you away. It's not, absolutely amazing. It's not even as good as the main games, but out of all the Persona 5 spin-offs, I think this game is the best story. It is my favorite story, at least. But enough about the story. The first thing you probably notice when you look at this game is the aesthetic, the art style, and the fact that all of the characters are chibi. Yes, it does use a chibi art style, and while I don't like chibi in plenty of instances, this is not one of those cases. I like how this game looks, I like the chibi art style, I like that it has Persona 5's aesthetic and vibe, and I think it looks pretty good all things considered. This is clearly a more budget game by Sega and Atlus versus, the main Persona games or Yakuza or Sonic, so I'm gonna cut it a little slack, but I think it looks nice. The interface looks great as always, but it's time to talk about what you're actually doing in this game. The primary gameplay is a turn-based tactical RPG. Now, this is going to sound pretty reductive, but if you've played any of the modern XCOM games or have ever touched Mario plus Rabbids, either one, then you are going to feel very familiar with the gameplay immediately. It plays very similar to those games in several areas, but it does have a Persona flair over all of it. And like Persona 5 Strikers, I think the game is able to carve out its own identity. It does enough different things here so you don't just go, oh, it's an XCOM clone or something like that. But it does have a lot of similarities, like you'll be taking cover, you'll be moving around a grid, and having the high ground Anakin is almost always a good thing. Where this game really differs from other turn-based tactical games is when the Persona elements get thrown in here. That, and you actually can't miss any of your shots unless they're standing behind like a wall or something and they're able to totally block it off. You're not going to be standing point blank at somebody and somehow miss like in XCOM. How does that happen? It's simplified, streamlined, whatever you want to call it in that aspect, and that's fine with me. When it comes to the Persona elements, Personas are very much in play here. The elements are in play. You can hit enemies with weaknesses. They're resistant to things. And like Persona, if you hit an enemy with their weakness or get a critical, you will get one more turn, which you very much can abuse in this game. You can do all-out attacks by making triangles on the map with your characters in real time, since you do get to just freely walk around, and you're just totally able to own everything that's in the triangle, and it's actually really satisfying to pull off, and you feel like a genius if you happen to get like all the enemies on a map. On top of that, something different from all the other Persona games is you can actually equip Personas to any party member. They all get one Persona you can equip to them on top of their base Persona, so you can give them different moves and actually make them have slightly different builds. They don't all feel crazy different from each other, but I like that there was a little difference between the characters and it made you strategize who you were going to choose. And then of course, as you progress through the game, you get experience and can level up your characters. There's skill points, you can change their weapons out, there's even some side missions you can do. But there's no kind of social link confidant bond system here, which is an interesting choice. But when it comes to the core gameplay, the tactical combat, what you're doing like 80% of this game, I actually think it's pretty great. It's fun, it has a really good flow and pace to it, it's fast. I don't think the game gets bogged down in the Persona elements. I really do think they enhance the tactical gameplay, and you can have some 9,000 IQ moves here, and it's really cool. There's actually a good amount of enemy types here, and you'll need different strategies for each one. There's even some bosses that show up, so that's pretty cool. I will mention though that this game is not the most challenging. In fact, I'll just straight up say it, it's a pretty easy game. Like the Persona elements they throw in there, like one more in the criticals, make this game relatively easy. As someone who's played XCOM and both Mario plus Rabbids, I really never had an area where I struggled or even had to retry something more than once. I don't even think I ever died. I just didn't like how I went about the battle and retried it. So if you're looking for that hardcore tactical experience, you're not going to find it here. This game is pretty casual in that sense, but I also think it's very inviting to the genre if you're someone who doesn't really play turn-based tactics games, or you've never played one of these types of games. I think this is a great place to start. And again, it does have a very good flow to it. It is very user-friendly. The UI is actually quite good, and I really did enjoy the gameplay. The game's got a good length to it, around 20 hours, and I never thought the game got stale or repetitive. And again, I like the payoff to the story. I think it has a good story. Persona 5T, it really is one of the very best Persona spin-offs, and I have no problem recommending it to people who like turn-based tactical games or anyone who likes Persona 5. It's on the Game Pass, and I'm already seeing it on sale, so it's going to be relatively cheap fast. And so here we have the game that started the whole Persona 5 series, you know, Persona 5, releasing in 2016. Now, I've talked about Persona 5 plenty of times on the channel before, but I'll happily reiterate because Persona 5 really is one of my favorite games of all time. Taking place in modern day Tokyo, it sees our main character really just trying to live a normal life when all of a sudden he gets pulled into this crazy other world. There's a lot more than meets the eye here. A bunch of other students get involved and a bunch of crazy shit happens, and that's really all I'm gonna say. I know that's not the best explanation for the premise, but I really don't want to spoil a single thing. I love the story to this game. It is so good. Like, all the Persona games have good stories, but the story in Persona 5, ooh, it is so good. Like, the characters are legendarily good. There's a reason people still love the cast nowadays, because it's so good. Like, each character is great, the antagonists are great, the way the game progresses. I have nothing but a ton of praise for the story, characters, world building. Like, the premise is so good. I really don't have anything to complain about when it comes to the story or characters or anything like that. It's one of the best stories you will find in any video game, not just role-playing games, any game. It is that good. Like, Persona 3 and especially Persona 4 have great worlds and characters, but in my opinion, they really just can't touch Persona 5's characters and world. I love it to death. And when it comes to the gameplay, I really also enjoy the hell out of it. There's really two parts to the gameplay. There's the role-playing dungeon crawling gameplay, and then the life simulation side of things. It's very similar to Persona 3 and 4 in terms of its structure and format and how the game progresses a day at a time. And I love the life simulation aspect of this game. You go to school every day, you learn, you take tests, but then you have free time every day. You can hang out with your friends, you can increase your social link, now called confidants, with not only your friends but other characters as well. And there's actually quite a bit to do in this game during the free time, especially if you want to level up your personality stats. You're really going to have to work at these, and I enjoy the free time. I enjoy the hell out of the life simulation stuff, but when it comes to the battles, the RPG aspect, it's great. I will just immediately say the dungeons, the level design, the dungeon crawling itself is so much better than Persona 3 and 4. Persona 3 and 4 have borderline randomly generated dungeons for the most part. This game, no. They are all handcrafted, they're personalized, there's puzzles, they're all incredibly different from each other, and I love all of them. I love playing through these dungeons. Like, the palaces are really great in this game. Again, it just stomps anything Persona 3 and 4 had. Where you can do basic attacks, you can summon your persona, you can do elemental attacks, there's weaknesses, the one mores, criticals, all-out attack. And when it comes to the battles, again, really I think it's the best of the whole Persona series. It is SMT gameplay, so if you've played any of these games, not just Persona, you're going to feel pretty right at home here. It's all here. There's a few new elements like the baton pass, and I think this adds even more strategy to the battles. The battles do have a decent amount of strategy. SMT's always had a good amount of strategy with the battles, and I think it's great. It has a great flow to it. Some of these battles go really fast, and again, I just really like the flow here. It just has a really nice pace to it, and I never got sick of these battles or the battle music. In fact, I'm gonna just immediately bring it up now. The music in this game is incredible. It is beautiful. It is amazing. I have nothing but the highest praise for the music. It is so flipping good. The graphics are also really great. This game has an amazing art style. There is very few games that look this stylized or look this good stylized. Like the art style, the graphics, the presentation, it is just straight legendary, and it has some of the coolest menus of any video game. I love everything to do with this game's aesthetic and graphics and music. It's all just superb. And it's really great that it's all great, because you'll be playing this game a long time. You'll be looking at this game for a very, very long time. This is really one of the longest games ever made. It took me around 68, 69 nice hours. And I guess I must have really rushed through the game, because it seems like it takes most people around 90 to 100 hours. But either way, yeah, it's a really long game. But what's incredible and what's crazy is I never got bored of this game. I never got tired of this game. I really wanted to see what was going to happen next. It has a phenomenal pace to it. It has a great gameplay loop, and I really just never got tired of it. I wanted to see what was going to happen next, and I was so invested the entire time from start to finish, which is just so crazy relative to other video games. Some games really struggle to keep your attention or keep you engaged by the 10-hour mark, the 15-hour mark. This game kept me engaged, intrigued, interested for over 60 hours. I was never tired of it. That's just crazy. Yes, it is a huge time commitment, and it is a very long game that is probably going to take you a couple weeks, if not months, to beat, but it is so worth it. It is a phenomenal experience. It really is one of my favorite video games of all time. I couldn't put it down start to finish. I somehow finished this game in a month, and you know what? It was as magical of an experience as it gets. I know that's corny as hell, but I mean it. It really was just a great experience that I truly have zero problem recommending anyone, even people who don't like RPGs or turn-based games. I think they're even gonna like this one. But then what did Atlas do? They made the game even better and somehow longer with Persona 5 Royal. Yes, the enhanced re-release of Persona 5 that came out in 2019 is easily the best of the Persona 5 games. It really does make the original Persona 5 just kind of obsolete. If you're going to play this game at all at this point, I really recommend the Royal. The Royal really does improve things over Persona 5, and it remixes things from the original. So even if you played the original, the Royal is still worth playing through. The story is actually greatly expanded with a new character or two. The last part of the game has been heavily expanded on, as the original game kind of had an abrupt ending. This game, no. It adds another semester and goes on even longer. Now the game takes well over 100 hours to complete for most people. But it adds new personas. It does mix things up from the original game in terms of weaknesses and elements. The dungeon design has been messed with a little bit, and it's all for the better. The game even adds new music. This is just hands down the definitive version of Persona 5, and the best part of it all is it's widely accessible. The original Persona 5 was only on PS4, and I knew several people that were like, I don't have a PS4, but I really want to play Persona 5. Well, Persona 5 Royal, it's on Switch, it's on Xbox, it's on PC, it's on PS5, it's on everything. There is no reason to not be able to play it now. This really is just one of the greatest video games ever made. No hyperbole, it is. I love it to death. It's just a great game. It's a huge time investment, but man, so worth it. Absolutely worth it. But that's it for this video. I know y'all knew it was a foregone conclusion that Royal was going to be the best of the Persona 5 series, and here we are, it is the best, but I mean, how could it not be? But I'm glad I got to talk about the Persona 5 spin-offs. I'll be talking about every Persona game soon enough for the Persona 3 remake. If you made it to this part of the video, comment Joker is in our main character. That's a little code word. You get a heart from me. See y'all later. Hope you have a wonderful day, and bye-bye now.